Hey guys, Lord Nick here bringing you another League of Legends related video. In this video, I kind of want to talk about something that's a little bit old news and everybody kind of knows the things about. But for the casual player that's always wondering why people are bitching about ADC, I kind of wanted to talk about it in this video. So we're going to talk why I personally moved away from the ADC role, along with what Riot did that caused the ADC role to be such a terrible position nowadays by considerations of most players. So, back last year, beginning of last year, ADCs were still pretty good in the meta. Overall, they were not dominative, but it wasn't a bad meta to start the year for ADCs. Overall, the game seemed relatively at its balance. Riot started buffing some assassins. It became a little harder for ADCs, but you still had a lot of options. You had heal supports protecting you, shield supports protecting you. Overall, I mean, the meta was kind of forced by Riot's hand, but it was still relatively a okay meta for ADCs. Your job was still to kill tanks, and you could still burst out other people, and if you got to the late game, you could carry. So, what did Riot do that stemmed me, a very avid ADC player, have been playing ADC since Season 4, Season 5, so, about 3 to 4 seasons I've been playing ADC, to just quit immediately? Well, it started with one big change after another. So Riot this last year decided to experiment with doing a big patch, followed by a small patch, followed by a big patch. What this then did led to a lot of instability in the game. For about a month, you're playing off of one big patch with some small patches to kind of fix the problems with a big patch, and you kind of get used to it. And then here comes another big patch that then wrecks everything that you've already practiced. So you don't really have enough time to adjust and become kind of kind of complacent with the meta. That's the word I was looking for. Complacency can usually breed some problems of its own, but it also led to more stability with your ability to grow as a player. This year, Riot kind of canceled that by just constantly making changes that caused you, the player, to have to constantly adapt, which is good and bad. Good because it really weeded the worst players down in ELO, and the better ones could kind of move up because of it, but even the better players were having issues with it. Now, the second thing Riot did was that buff for assassins that I was talking about. It made it lightly more difficult for me and other ADCs to kind of contest in the meta, but we had if you had a good support with you, you could still do pretty well. And, you know, it wasn't always like you're against an assassin, it's just when you were, you really hoped that you had a heal or shield support. The last thing Riot did was the big patch at the middle of the year, which was marking the marksman changes. Now, Riot decided that they needed to make a patch that would change how crit ADCs played. They didn't like the fact that crit ADCs were the domination in the meta, and that you didn't really see any other variety. So what they decided to do was nerf crit ADCs. What they did, on the other hand, was completely rework their items and completely throttle any chance they had of winning in the early game. At the same time, they had been hastily speeding up the meta to make assassins more viable, because if you're not familiar, most assassins are much more strong in the early game. So when they were amping up for this assassin meta, they'd already kind of sped up the pacing of the game quite a bit, so that you nerf ADCs, make them build cost more, make them do less damage overall, and push everything back, which led them to being much more late game carries, which wasn't necessarily bad, but what you have already done with the meta was speeding it up. So there was no chance for them to really get there, which then stemmed people to playing mages in the bot lane and just giving up on the role entirely. Myself found it very infuriating to be two-shot by an assassin in the early game, yet I had no real retaliation. I couldn't build the same build as them because most of my champions didn't build that, exception being Jhin, who could go lethality, but it wasn't strong on him at this time. His abilities in the past had led him to being really good with lethality. They'd nerfed those abilities in the past to make lethality not as good, and thus it made it a bit more problematic to play him. And many other ADCs stemmed from this problem. You couldn't really adjust their build much outside of adjusting where you bought IE, which then led to overall problems and instability with the role itself, which just made mages move to the bot lane, assassins take over the mid lane, and jungle, and the game became a completely different game. So where did I move? I moved to top lane for more stability, and I found that for a while that was the case. Now, what Riot did that design flaw overall was not paying attention to what they'd already done with the game and inadvertently made this most massive nerf. So all three of those things that I listed as the primary problems, making too many big patches, making the game move too fast by adding too much buffs to assassins, and then overall just nuking crit ADCs, who were the predominant meta for ADCs at the time, just all led to problems that Riot just had overlooked. Um, and this is, simple solution in the future how Riot can fix this. One is revert IE back to the way it was. Yes, people disliked it in many ways because ADCs could hit a big power spike before assassins could really hit that if they didn't get ahead in lane or if they didn't roam a lot. That being said, jungle and mid are set up currently that if you revert IE, I don't think it's going to change too much for assassin players, but it's definitely going to make it much better, healthier laning phase for ADCs. Because here's why. Right now, it's reliant on your support dominating the other two people in lane, and you're kind of there just poking with damage and finishing them off. That's not healthy for an ADC player, as you have to kind of shift your playstyle midway through the game. Because right now, you have to wait and hope that your support can kind of position correctly and help you get good poke on them. The exception being to like Ezreal and maybe Lucian, who are very dominative lane ADCs right now. And Caitlyn kind of coming up fast right now as well. So, what do you do to kind of change this is you revert IE back to the way it was, so people could build damage early on, and those who are scaling ADCs actually can get a little bit of damage earlier and actually be effective in the laning phase, which just leads to longer games overall, which could also bring tanks back into the meta. But that's a good start at least, right? That's a good way to at least revive the ADC role. Now Riot is looking at two ways to potentially do this, and Riot 1, and it looks like the one they might do, is a big overhaul to IE currently, which would make it a 5,000 gold item, which builds out of a BF sword, a pickaxe, and zeal. Gives you crit, and it gives you 50% crit chance. Pretty good. The raw damage that those items have already brought in the past, also really good. You can find it on the website, and then it also it just overall is just a good item. And here, it kind of fixes some of those problems because you can build it first and you still get crit, you get attack speed, you get damage. Pretty good. That's a pretty solid item. Problem is it's 5,000 gold, so your power spike is still slightly delayed. Now, this could still work theoretically, but it could also just cause more problems as your power spike is already currently delayed, and that's what's been leading to the problems currently. So I don't really think it's going to fix it as well as it could by just reverting IE back the way it was, which is still a 3,000 gold piece item, but if that's your first item, that's not too much to throw out of the way. 5,000 is. So a lot of people were trying to say though, but you can build those opponents pretty fast on their own. Yes and no, but your opponents can do the same thing. Even if you get a small lead, they can usually still buy a BF sword, even if you're buying a BF sword and a pickaxe, but you still have to get 1,400 more gold to get to the item. In that meantime, if your opponent is just better at CSing at you, and they just start playing safe and you can't get the kills that you were getting early on, you might just hit your power spike at the same time, which is good and bad because it helps with the CSing mechanics, but it also punishes you because, yes, you got a lead overall, but they started playing safe for just a short while, and they've managed to gain back all that lead that you've accrued. Now, that's not a typical situation, but it could happen, and to me, I think just allowing IE to go back to the way it was also just prevents people from building crit on champions they had no reason to build crit on in the first place. A lot of assassins in the past never built crit because they always needed armor, pen, and lethality to be able to just insta-burst, but now because crit is currently tied to true damage, that's actually a pretty good way for them to go right now. But that's just me looking at it in kind of a rose-tinted goggles, I guess. I kind of miss the days of old where ADCs were dominative, and I kind of want it back. But I also am looking at it in the standpoint of what has Riot done in the past that has proven their worth to be able to make big moving changes like this. And as of recent times, they have proven that they are able to do big changes like this without utterly destroying the meta. So that's where my faith in Riot has kind of fallen. What do I think this season could hold for us, though, is going to be how I'm going to wrap up this video. I think this season has potential to be better than last season because I really don't want to believe that you can get worse than what they did last season. Now I'm gonna, knock on wood on that because Riot has had tendencies to prove me wrong. But at the beginning of last year, I did a prediction video, and I predicted basically everything I thought was going to happen in there. The difference is the shakeup for the meta I thought was going to be healthy. Turns out it was completely unhealthy and caused an entire group of players to just be alienated in the game. So what do I think Riot's going to do this year? I really feel like Riot should be playing it more safe this year, as they did actually have a decent loss of players last year. Now, it didn't cripple the game, and it's not going to be the end of League of Legends because they lost players. But if they consistently do this every year, where they screw over one role after another, they could see that they would lose enough players that they're not going to actually start making it back anymore. So I think Riot's going to play it safe this year. And what changes do I think they're going to make? I think they're going to go through the cycle that they always end up going through when they are playing it safe, which is bruisers are going to get nerfed slightly. Assassins are going to get nerfed slightly, and they've kind of already announced that they're going to do this by saying that they're going to be readdressing systemic failures within the game, specifically targeting damage, which people believe is going to be nerfed to burst damage individuals, which means bruisers and assassins are probably going to get toned back quite a bit. And that's fine, because right now they're kind of in an unhealthy spot. So what does that generally mean? When they do that, though, if they do anything at all, what they usually love to do is they slightly nerf the damage and they increase tank items to being a little bit more relevant, which increases tanks, which decreases assassins and negates the nerf but leads to longer games. So I feel like the season is going to end up being a little bit longer paced. It may not be at the very beginning, but it very well be near summer. At some point, we're going to see a tank meta this season. That's my first real big prediction. Next prediction, you're going to see ADCs back on top. Now, it's going to be a while. I don't think it's going to be at the beginning of the season. I don't think Riot's completely learned from their mistakes. They're going to be doing a lot of reworking on ADCs here shortly to give them a nice solid buff. That being said, I don't think that they're going to tone down the stuff that's screwing them over currently enough to make them as viable as they could be. But I think it's going to be in that direction, and by the same time that it becomes a tank meta, ADCs are going to be back on top again. Lastly, I feel like this is going to be the season that Riot rank system overall is going to be at a crucial point. Riot, if you don't know, has also changed its rank system to be more evaluating off of each role and address you into proper ranks based off of your role, and then give you an overall rank as kind of like an average of them. I think this is a very good idea. I feel like this is going to help a lot of players see where their weaknesses are, myself included, as I don't know really where I rank in each role. I've made it to plat multiple years in a row, and I don't really know how. So with this kind of system in place, I think it's going to allow for better player growth, which should lead to healthier gameplay. Though you're going to find that one-trick Yasuo who's stuck in silver and is told that his mid lane is silver, his top lane is silver, and not know why he's a silver Yasuo. So you're still going to have those people, but they're at least going to understand what roles are holding them back, hopefully, and maybe they'll be able to grow, but I'm not going to hold my breath for it. So I guess that really wasn't a prediction, but rather just kind of an assessment of how I think this season is going to go. Anyhow, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I hope you found this video somewhat helpful, or at least a little bit illuminating on my opinions on things, and some of the things that have happened so far. Thank you guys again for watching. Hope to see you in the next video.